Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Science Behind the Sci-Fi. I'm your host, Tyler Yohe, and I'm the founder of Broken Crown Games.
And I'm Katie O. I'm your new co-host and science enthusiast.
For those of you watching this, please vote a thumbs up or a +1 on Google+. And
we were wondering, have you ever thought about living on another planet? We have three really awesome guests this week to explain that concept a little bit better. Our first panelist is an independent science and technology writer, as well as a former participant in the High Seas experiment, Kate Greene. Welcome to the panel, Kate.
Sure, hi, it's good to be here.
Next, we also have the founder of Blue Marble Space and a systems engineer for NASA's Ames Research Center, Sanjoy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sanjoy.
And last but not least, we have the president of Brazen Productions and the host of Dr. Geek's Laboratory. You guys can find the podcast on iTunes and Dr. Geek's Laboratory's website. So we have Scott Viguie.
Oh, yes, I'm Dr. Scott Viguie.
So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. So first off, Kate, that High Seas experiment sounded awesome and definitely in the right step towards colonizing places like Mars. But you were still here on Earth, and not to mention Hawaii, which was awesome. But would there be any kind of time lag as opposed to just calling outside in the sun and being like, hey, Mom and Dad, I'm in Hawaii? Like, how would that work if you were on Mars?
We had internet access, but the goal was to simulate a sort of delay that you would experience on Mars. And the maximum delay, with Mars at one end of its orbit and Earth at the other is about 20 minutes. And so what we were able to test out was a system developed by researchers at Kennedy Space Center. And this is a sort of delayed internet server that held our emails in a buffer for 20 minutes and then held emails incoming for about 20 minutes. So a round trip, it's a 40-minute time lag, just if you're sending an email and then getting a response immediately. So when we were communicating with mission support, we had to take that into account. Imagine that over the long haul, you really have to have an autonomous crew that can function pretty well on its own without getting instructions immediately from mission support.
Kate, I'm not sure if you realize yet, but Katie's going to be the one throwing you guys all your science questions so you'll kind of understand the question and be ready for it. I'm the one that's really going to hit you with a curveball and kind of mess with you. So you're my first guinea pig here. I'm hitting you with the sci-fi. So obviously we're getting close to the Mars simulations, and we're getting close to possibly one day doing it in the near future. But knowing the emotional and even technical challenges that we face with a 20-minute delay for Mars, how do you see that affecting when we grow further and further out? What if we have a new colony on Saturn's moon of Titan and we're trying to have a mission support based on Mars, and there's such a huge communication delay there? How do you see that affecting the autonomy of the crew and even the morale of the crew?
It's a great question, and some people are talking about this, and one idea is just to kind of go back to the age of exploration. And we've only really had the internet for a short period of time, and we've all gotten used to it, but there's been exploration for eons, human exploration. We've been traveling the globe for millennia. And so I think that, without communication back home. So I think that we might actually have to kind of go back in time as we go forward.
So let's say now we've made it to Mars. I've read that the temperature on the surface of Mars can reach a beautiful 80 degrees like it is here in San Diego, which is perfect for me, but it can also plummet down to minus 200 some odd degrees. So Sanjoy, what are some of the other environmental stresses that we're going to have to overcome to start a colony?
Great question. In fact, the temperature can go up to, in fact, 95, if you're in the equator on a south-facing wall of a crater. But the atmosphere of Mars is so thin that it has no ability to retain any heat. So as soon as the sun goes over the horizon, you drop like 200 degrees. So it's not great for an evening barbecue. Radiation is a big problem for humans on the surface of Mars, and gravity is also a stress, but I think it's something that's much more able to overcome than radiation. Temperature, I think we will have to be very cautious about it and live in a very controlled environment, but that goes without saying for a Mars colony.
For the viewers who are watching live, you guys can stick around. For everyone else, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. We're going to focus more on colonizing more places in our solar system when we're back. So don't go anywhere. So our very, very quick break is concluded. So now we're going to be talking more about a multi-planet society. My first question actually is for Sanjoy. So when we start doing all this interplanetary travel, are there any other stresses that the body might come into if we are going from, say, a small planet to a bigger planet with different gravity?
Yeah, absolutely, Katie. So gravity is a big issue, has a big control on the human body. So if you had a colonist that was born on Mars, for example, where the where the gravity is a third than what it is on Earth, or even on Titan, where it is a sixth, even more than that, almost an eighth of the gravity that is on Earth, and then they come to Earth without any adaptation, then they would simply not be able to walk around and be vagrant like we all are here on Earth.
Real quick, as another follow-up on that, Scott, this one's actually going to be directed at you. Do you expect there to eventually be almost planetism rather than racism?
Unfortunately, prejudice is something that is very human, and I see that probably coming is something that we're going to have to deal with moving forward. I think what it will start off with as planetary pride. You know, the fact that you have a thriving colony somewhere else, and you have people who are very proud. You know, I'm a first generation Martian, or something along those lines. It will start off as something that we're very, very proud of, and then it will probably turn a little dark, just because human nature is that we tend to, as sophisticated as we are, is the fact that it is the 21st century. Our mindset can be a little tribal, and so it's something that we'll probably have to push up against. But it will definitely encourage this idea that the colonies are separate.
Okay, so for all of this interplanetary travel, what kind of passport am I going to need? What kind of money are we going to have? Am I going to have to learn all of these new exchange rates? Scott, can you help me out? Are we going to, does it look like at least, we would have more of a unified monetary system like the Euro transformed Europe? Or do you think we will break down back into all these different little localized currencies?
What a great question, and I think it builds upon Tyler's last one, really. I think that we'll start with a unified currency because we all came from Earth. But as the civilizations on these other planets and moons develop, then I think that, with money comes taxation, with taxation comes representation, and so you'll really have to ask yourself, am I being represented by Earth? I mean, how much does Earth have in common with me if I'm, dealing with the trials and tribulations of living on Mars?
I actually love that answer. And with that said, though, if you expect us to, as a society, slowly start breaking up into our individual colonies and planets, would you expect something kind of like the UN to eventually form?
Wonderful question. And when I think about colonizing the solar system, I think about it's our chance to get it right this time, because history tends to repeat itself over and over and over again. But it's a chance to really kind of look back and say, hey, we're not Americans, we're humans. We're not. I'm not from this colony. I'm part of the human race. But I think what's wonderful about the obstacles about living out in outer space is that everybody has to deal with those issues. Everyone has to deal with radiation. Everyone has to deal with asteroids or other types of impacts, and so therefore it's going to be easier to sell a more of an intergalactic community on this is our joint problem.
Actually, my next question was more about the actual travel and how it's going to affect our future space explorers. Because I know my favorite way to travel is to sleep until I get there, but it turns out that sleep is actually another huge issue that could face our colony members and seriously affect them too. Kate, I read your article that you wrote for the High Seas about sleep deprivation and how for astronauts going on long duration journeys, it could become a major issue. whether it's for fine motor skills or memory. These are all related to sleep. So are we going to have a solar system full of cranky, sleep-deprived space explorers, or is there anything we can do to help our sleep cycle and get some restful sleep in space?
Yeah, it's a very serious problem that NASA's looking at. In fact, just recently, this past week, a study came out in Lancet Neurology. It's the largest sleep study on astronauts ever. Sleep's really hard for astronauts for a variety of reasons. I mean, there's a workload that's pretty rough. There's a completely different environment that you're operating within in terms of sound and stimuli. But there's also the problem of not having the sunlight cues that we have on Earth. So there's some thinking that maybe if we can simulate the sunlight, then we can help regulate circadian systems better. And there are lights being tested on the ISS that do that. More blue light in the morning, and then throughout the course of the day, the lights sort of dim and shift colors as they might with a natural sunlit day on Earth. So it's crazy because even a cloudy day, I'm in San Francisco and it's kind of overcast, but the sky is still so much brighter than most office buildings lighting. And so, I mean, if you ask the question, are we going to be these sleep-deprived zombies in space? Well, you might also want to look at the office environment that so many people work in.
Well, I believe that pretty much wraps up everything we wanted to cover in this episode of Science Behind the Sci-Fi. Panelists, Kate, thank you all so much for, Katie, thanks for hosting. Panelists, thanks for joining. If you're watching, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as give us a quick thumbs up.
All right, yeah, if you guys have any questions for the future, don't hesitate to try and get a hold of one of us. That's my Instagram handle. Other than that, thanks for having me today. I will see you guys next month. Second Sunday, you guys don't forget, the second Sunday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm Katie O, and that was Tyler O, and that was some Science Behind the Sci-Fi.